Hello, my name is Gregory Garcia. I'm 29 years old. I work as a freelance graphic designer from my apartment, and I share this place with my roommate, Ethan Rogers, who's been my best friend since college. But right now, standing in this hallway with my bladder about to burst, and Ethan's older sister, Laura Lopez, blocking the bathroom door, I'm wondering how I got myself into this mess. Laura's hand is pressed against the white wooden door, her dark eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that makes my stomach flip. She whispers, "We need to talk before you go in there." Her voice carries a weight that tells me whatever she's about to say will change everything. The morning light streams through the hallway window, casting shadows across her face, and I can see the worry lines etched around her eyes. I shift my weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the urgent pressure in my bladder. "Laura, I really need to use the bathroom. Can we talk after?" She shakes her head slowly, her long black hair falling across her shoulders. "No, Gregory, this can't wait. Trust me. You don't want to go in there without knowing what I'm about to tell you." The way she says my name makes something twist in my chest. Laura has been coming around more often lately, ever since her divorce was finalized 3 months ago. She's been staying in Ethan's room while she looks for her own place, sleeping on an air mattress and trying to piece her life back together. I've watched her from a distance, admiring her resilience, the way she laughs despite everything she's been through. But let me back up and tell you how we got to this moment, because the story really started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning when I first realized I was falling for my roommate's sister. I had been living with Ethan for 2 years in this cramped two-bedroom apartment in downtown Portland. The place wasn't much to look at, with its peeling paint and creaky floors, but the rent was affordable and the location was perfect for my work. Ethan worked as a line cook at a trendy restaurant downtown, pulling late shifts that meant he was usually asleep when I started my day. That Tuesday morning, I was working on a logo design for a local bakery when I heard voices in the hallway. Ethan was talking to someone in hushed tones. "She can stay as long as she needs," Ethan was saying. "Don't worry about it, Laura. We'll figure it out." I had heard about Laura over the years. Ethan talked about his older sister with a mixture of admiration and protective concern. She was 32, 3 years older than Ethan, and had been married to what Ethan described as a controlling jerk. When Ethan mentioned that she was getting divorced, I could hear the relief in his voice. The first time I actually saw Laura, I was coming back from a client meeting around noon. She stepped out of the apartment door, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Laura was beautiful in a way that seemed effortless. She had the same dark hair as Ethan, but hers fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. Her brown eyes were expressive and kind, and when she smiled at me, I felt something shift in my chest. "You must be Gregory," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Laura, Ethan's sister. Thanks for letting me crash here while I get back on my feet." Her handshake was firm and warm, and I found myself holding on a moment longer than necessary. "Of course," I managed to say. "Stay as long as you need." Over the following days, I found myself paying attention to the small details of sharing space with Laura. She was quiet and considerate, always cleaning up after herself. I noticed the way she hummed softly while making coffee in the morning, the scent of her shampoo that lingered in the bathroom, the stack of books she kept by the air mattress, mostly novels and poetry collections. I learned that Laura worked as a freelance translator, specializing in Spanish and Portuguese documents for legal firms. She would sit at the kitchen table with her laptop, wearing reading glasses that made her look scholarly and focused. Sometimes I would glance over and catch her biting her lower lip in concentration. The divorce had been messy. Her ex-husband had contested the division of assets and made the process as difficult as possible. Laura had been forced to move out with only her personal belongings, starting over with almost nothing at 32. One evening, about a week after she moved in, I found Laura sitting on the small balcony off our living room. She was wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of tea and staring out at the city lights. I'd been heading to the kitchen when I noticed her through the sliding glass door. I tapped gently on the glass and she turned to look at me. Her eyes were slightly red, as if she had been crying, but she smiled and gestured for me to join her. "Mind if I sit?" I asked. "Please," she said, scooting over to make room. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and nightlife. "It's beautiful up here," Laura said finally. "I forgot how much I missed city views." "You lived in the suburbs before?" "Gresham," she replied. "Big house, big yard, big mortgage. Everything was supposed to be big and impressive, but it felt small somehow, if that makes sense." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. We talked for another hour that night, sharing stories about our work, our dreams, our frustrations. Laura told me about her love for languages, how she had studied abroad in Barcelona and fell in love with Spanish. I told her about my struggles to build a sustainable design business. When we finally went back inside, I felt like I had discovered something precious. Laura wasn't just beautiful, she was intelligent and thoughtful and funny in a way that made me want to spend hours listening to her talk. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of stolen conversations and meaningful glances. Laura and I would find excuses to be in the kitchen at the same time, lingering over coffee and talking about everything from books to travel. She had a way of listening that made me feel heard in a way that was rare and precious. I learned that she spoke 4 languages fluently, that she had always wanted to travel to Morocco, that she loved cooking but had gotten out of the habit during her marriage because her ex-husband had criticized everything she made. One evening she cooked dinner for all 3 of us, a Spanish paella that filled the apartment with the sense of saffron and seafood. Watching her move around our small kitchen with confidence and joy, I realized I was falling for her in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The turning point came on a Friday night when Ethan had to work a double shift. Laura and I found ourselves alone in the apartment for the first time. We decided to order pizza and watch a movie, settling on the couch with a bottle of wine. Halfway through some romantic comedy, Laura made a sound of disgust. "Oh, please," she said, gesturing at the screen. "No one falls in love that quickly in real life." "I don't know," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Sometimes you just know when someone is special." She turned to look at me, and I could see something shift in her expression. "Do you really believe that?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I think some connections are immediate. Not love, maybe, but recognition. Like your soul recognizes something familiar in another person." Laura was quiet for a long moment. "That's beautiful, Gregory. I wish I had more faith in that kind of connection." The conversation that followed was one of the most honest I had ever had with anyone. Laura told me about her marriage, how it had started with genuine affection, but had gradually become something cold and controlling. Her ex-husband had been critical of her career, her friends, even her family relationships. I told her about my own romantic history, the series of relationships that had felt almost right but never quite clicked. "Maybe we're both just waiting for the right person," Laura said, and the way she looked at me when she said it made me think she might be talking about more than general philosophy. We stayed up until almost 3 in the morning, talking and laughing. When we finally decided to go to bed, there was a moment of hesitation in the hallway. Laura was staying in Ethan's room, and my bedroom was at the opposite end. "Good night, Gregory," she said, and she leaned forward to kiss my cheek. But somehow, maybe because I turned my head at the wrong moment, her lips brushed against the corner of my mouth instead. The contact was brief, barely more than a whisper of touch, but it sent electricity through my entire body. "Good night, Laura," I managed to say. The next morning brought awkwardness and uncertainty. Ethan was home, making his usual weekend breakfast. Laura emerged looking perfectly composed as if nothing had happened, but I caught her glancing at me when she thought Ethan wasn't looking. We spent the weekend dancing around each other, polite and friendly, but careful not to be alone together. The almost kiss had shifted something between us, opened a door that neither of us seemed ready to walk through. On Monday morning, I heard Laura on the phone in the kitchen. She was talking to someone about apartment viewings, scheduling times to look at places. The realization that she was actively looking for her own place hit me like a punch to the stomach. I hadn't realized how much I had gotten used to her presence, how much I looked forward to our morning conversations and evening chats. The thought of her leaving filled me with a sense of loss that surprised me. That evening, after Ethan left for work, I found Laura packing some books into a cardboard box. "Moving out soon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up from the mache, and I could see something sad in her expression. "I found a few places that might work. I should probably start the application process this week. You don't have to rush, you know. Ethan said you could stay as long as you need." Laura smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know, but I think it's time for me to get back on my own feet." "Is this about Friday night?" I asked quietly. She stopped packing and looked at me directly. "Partly," she admitted. "I don't want to make things complicated for you and Ethan. You two have a good thing here. You're not messing anything up," I said. "If anything, having you here has made this place feel more like home." Laura's expression softened, and for a moment I thought she might say something that would change everything. But then she shook her head and went back to packing. I think it's better this way, Gregory. Cleaner. The rest of the week passed in a blur of apartment viewings and polite distance. Laura found a studio apartment in Southeast Portland and put down a deposit. On Saturday night, her last night in our apartment, Ethan announced he was going out with coworkers after his shift. So once again, Laura and I found ourselves alone. We ordered Chinese takeout and ate it sitting on the floor, surrounded by boxes. The conversation was subdued, both of us aware that we were running out of time. I'm going to miss this, Laura said, gesturing around the apartment. Not just the place, but the feeling of it. We're going to miss you too, I said. I'm going to miss you. She looked at me then, really looked at me. Gregory, she started, then stopped. What? I asked gently. Nothing. It's just that in another time, another situation, I think we could have been good together. I think so too, I said. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, and when it was time to go to bed, we stood in the hallway again. This time there was no almost kiss, no moment of possibility. Laura hugged me, a proper goodbye hug. Thank you, Gregory, for everything. Take care of yourself, Laura. Sunday morning came too quickly. Laura was efficient and organized, loading her belongings into a borrowed truck with Ethan's help. When everything was loaded, Laura hugged Ethan goodbye and promised to have him over for dinner once she was settled. Then she turned to me. See you around, Gregory. See you around, I replied, knowing that we probably wouldn't. I watched the truck drive away, carrying Laura out of my life. The apartment felt empty without her. Not just physically, but emotionally. I found myself looking for her in the morning when I made coffee, listening for her voice in the evening. Then, 3 weeks after she moved out, Laura called Ethan to ask if she could come over to pick up a book she thought she had left behind. Ethan was at work, but he told her I would be home and could let her in. Laura arrived around 6 in the evening, looking beautiful and slightly nervous. She was wearing a blue dress I hadn't seen before, and her hair was styled differently. The past few weeks had been good to her, I could tell. Hi, Gregory, she said when I opened the door. We searched for the book together, checking the bookshelf and around the bed. After a few minutes, Laura straightened up and sighed. Maybe I left it at the new place. Sorry to bother you, it's no bother. How are you settling in? Good, she said, but there was something in her tone that suggested it wasn't entirely true. The apartment is nice, quiet, very different from here. Different how? It's just me, she said finally. No voices in the hallway, no one to talk to over coffee in the morning. I didn't realize how much I would miss the sense of community. You could come back for coffee sometime, I offered, if you wanted company. Laura looked at me then, and I could see something shift in her expression. Would that be okay? With you, I mean? Of course, why wouldn't it be? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I think you know that coffee wouldn't just be coffee, Gregory. At least not for me. The words hung in the air between us, honest and brave and terrifying. It wouldn't just be coffee for me either, I admitted. Laura smiled then, a real smile that lit up her entire face. But then the smile faded. But what about Ethan, she asked. What about the fact that I'm his sister and you're his best friend? I think Ethan wants us both to be happy, I said. And if we make each other happy, I think he would support that. You really believe that? I do. But there's only one way to find out. She nodded slowly. Okay, let's find out. What followed was one of the most honest conversations I had ever had. We sat on Ethan's bed and talked about everything. Our feelings for each other, our fears about complicating family relationships, our hopes for what might be possible. Laura told me she had been thinking about me constantly since moving out. She admitted she had been attracted to me from the first day we met, but had convinced herself that acting on those feelings would be selfish. I told her about the emptiness I had felt since she left, how the apartment had felt like it was missing something essential. I confessed that I had been falling for her gradually and that the almost kiss had confirmed feelings I had been trying to ignore. But sometimes, Laura said, perfect timing is less important than perfect connection. I agreed, and when she leaned toward me, I met her halfway. Our first real kiss was soft and tentative, but when she didn't pull away, when she instead deepened the kiss, I felt something click into place. When Ethan came home around 11, he found us sitting on the couch holding hands and looking nervous. He took one look at us and started laughing. Finally, he said, I was wondering when you two were going to figure it out. The conversation that followed was easier than either of us had expected. Ethan had noticed the connection from the beginning. He had been hoping we would act on it. Laura deserves someone who sees how amazing she is, he told me, and you deserve someone who appreciates your kindness. I think you're good for each other. That was 6 months ago. Laura and I have been together officially for 5 months now, taking things slowly and building something solid. She kept her studio apartment, but she spends most nights here. We've talked about finding a bigger place together. Laura's translation business has grown, and she's working on translating a collection of contemporary Latin American poetry. I've been commissioned to design the book cover, which feels like a beautiful collaboration. We've traveled together, taking weekend trips to the coast and mountains. Laura has started teaching me Spanish, and I've been helping her learn basic graphic design skills. We cook together, read together, and have long conversations about everything. But this morning, standing in the hallway with Laura's hand pressed against the bathroom door, I'm reminded that relationships are complicated, that even the happiest couples face unexpected challenges. Laura, I say again, I really need to use the bathroom. What's going on? She takes a deep breath. Gregory, there's something in there that's going to change everything, something that's going to affect both of our futures. My mind races through possibilities. Is everyone okay? I ask. Everyone's fine, she says quickly. But Gregory, I need you to know that whatever happens next, I love you. I love you more than I ever thought possible. The words should make me happy, but the way she says them fills me with dread. Laura, you're scaring me. What's in the bathroom? She looks down at her feet, then back up at me. Her eyes are bright with unshed tears, but there's also something else there. Something that looks like hope mixed with terror. A pregnancy test, she whispers. And Gregory, it's positive. The words hit me like a physical blow. I feel my knees go weak, and I have to lean against the wall for support. A pregnancy test. Positive. Laura is pregnant. How long have you known? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. I took the test an hour ago, she says. I woke up feeling sick for the 3rd day in a row, and I realized I was late. So I walked to the pharmacy and bought a test. I look at Laura, really look at her, and I can see the fear and uncertainty written across her face. She's been divorced for less than a year. She's just getting back on her feet, and now she's facing an unplanned pregnancy with a man she's been dating for only 5 months. What do you want to do? I ask gently. Laura's eyes fill with tears. I don't know, she admits. I'm terrified, Gregory. I'm 33. I'm finally feeling independent. And now this. I don't know if I'm ready to be a mother. I don't know if we're ready to be parents together. I reach out and take her hands in mine. Laura, whatever you decide, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. We're in this together. But are we? She asks, and her voice breaks slightly. Gregory, we haven't even said we love each other until 5 minutes ago. We haven't talked about moving in together permanently, or marriage, or any of the big future stuff. And now we're facing the biggest decision of all. She's right, of course. Our relationship has been wonderful but relatively new. We've been taking things slowly, being careful not to rush into anything too serious too quickly. But a pregnancy changes everything. I think about my own readiness for parenthood. At 29, I'm financially stable but not wealthy. My freelance business provides a decent living, but it's not steady income that makes planning for a family easy. I live in a cramped apartment with a roommate, but as I look at Laura, seeing the fear and hope warring in her expression, I realize that readiness might be less important than willingness. Am I willing to step up, to be the partner and father that Laura and a baby would need? The answer comes to me with surprising clarity. Yes. Laura, I say, and I wait until she looks directly at me. I love you. I know it's soon to say that, and I know the timing is complicated, but I love you. I love your intelligence and your kindness and your strength. She's crying now, tears streaming down her face. But she's also smiling. I love you too, she whispers. I've been wanting to say it for weeks. It's not too soon, I tell her. And if you want to have this baby, if you want to build a family together, then I want that too. It's not how I imagined it would happen, but maybe the best things in life don't happen according to our plans. Laura laughs through her tears. Are you sure? Because this is huge, Gregory. This would change everything. Everything's already changed, I point out. The moment you told me you were pregnant, Everything changed. Now we just get to decide what we want to do with that change. She's quiet for a long moment, considering. Then she nods slowly. I want to have this baby, she says, and her voice is stronger now, more certain. I'm scared, but I want this. I want to build a family with you. I pull her into my arms then, holding her close and feeling the weight and wonder of this moment. We're going to be parents. Laura and I are going to have a baby together. Can I see it? I ask softly. The test? Laura nods and opens the bathroom door. The test is sitting on the counter, a small plastic stick that has somehow managed to change the entire trajectory of our lives. I look at it, seeing the two clear lines that indicate pregnancy, and I feel a wave of emotion that catches me off guard. Joy, terror, excitement, responsibility, love. 2 lines, Laura says, clear as day. I turn to look at her, this woman who has become so important to me so quickly, and I see our future written in her face. It won't be easy, I say. No, Laura agrees. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. She smiles then, a smile that's full of hope and love and determination. Yes, she says, it will be worth it. We spend the next hour sitting on the bathroom floor, talking about everything and nothing. Laura tells me about her fears, how her own childhood was complicated by her parents' rocky marriage. I tell her about my own insecurities, how I've never felt particularly paternal, but how the idea of teaching a child to ride a bike fills me with unexpected excitement. We talk about practical things too. Laura's lease expires in 3 months, which gives us time to find a bigger place together. My income is variable but growing, and Laura's translation work provides steady supplemental income. We'll need to budget carefully, but we can make it work. When Ethan comes home from his morning shift, he finds us sitting at the kitchen table, holding hands and looking simultaneously terrified and ecstatic. Okay, he says, looking back and forth between us. What's going on? Laura and I look at each other, and she nods for me to tell him. Laura's pregnant, I say simply. Ethan's face goes through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, realization, and then pure joy. He lets out a whoop and rushes over to hug his sister. I'm going to be an uncle, he says, lifting Laura off her feet. I'm going to be the best uncle in the history of uncles. When he sets her down, he turns to me and extends his hand. Congratulations, man. You're going to be a great dad. The rest of the day passes in a blur of phone calls and planning. Laura calls her parents, who are surprised but supportive. My own parents are thrilled at the prospect of their first grandchild. We start looking at apartment listings online, searching for 2-bedroom places. We make a list of things we'll need, from cribs to car seats to health insurance adjustments. That evening, after Ethan leaves for his dinner shift, Laura and I find ourselves back on the balcony where we had our first real conversation months ago. Are you scared? Laura asks, leaning against my shoulder. Terrified, I admit, but also excited. You? Same, she says, but I keep thinking about what you said earlier, about the best things in life not happening according to our plans. Do you regret it? I ask. The way things happened between us? Laura is quiet for a moment. No, she says finally, I don't regret any of it. Meeting you, falling for you, this pregnancy, none of it was planned, but all of it feels right somehow. The next few weeks pass quickly, filled with doctor's appointments and apartment hunting. Laura's morning sickness is mild but persistent, and I find myself becoming an expert at making ginger tea and keeping saltine crackers stocked. We find a 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland with hardwood floors and large windows. The rent is higher than what we're paying now, but we can manage it. Laura's first ultrasound is scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. I take the day off to go with her, nervous and excited. The waiting room is filled with other couples in various stages of pregnancy. When they call Laura's name, we follow the technician into a small, dimly lit room. Laura lies back on the examination table, and I sit beside her, holding her hand as the technician applies gel to her stomach. The first image appears on the screen, and I have to admit that it mostly looks like abstract shapes to me. But the technician points out the head and body, and gradually I begin to see the outline of a tiny human being. There's your baby, the technician says warmly, but then her expression changes slightly, and she adjusts the wand, moving it around with more purpose. Is everything okay? Laura asks. Everything's fine, the technician assures us quickly. I just want to get a better look at something. She moves the wand again, and suddenly the image becomes clearer. I can see the baby's profile, but there's something else there too. Another shape. Oh my, the technician says softly. What? Laura and I say in unison. The technician turns to look at us, smiling widely. You're having twins. The words hit me like a physical blow. Twins. Two babies. Laura and I, who were just getting used to the idea of one baby, are having two. Twins, Laura repeats faintly. The technician points out the second baby on the screen, explaining how they're positioned. She prints out several pictures for us. When we leave the doctor's office, Laura and I walk to the car in stunned silence. We sit in the parking lot for several minutes, just looking at the ultrasound pictures. Twins, I say finally. Twins, Laura echoes. Then we both start laughing, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes from being completely overwhelmed. We're going to need a bigger apartment, Laura says. We're going to need a bigger everything, I reply. The next few months pass in a whirlwind of preparation. We find a 3-bedroom apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood. Laura's pregnancy progresses normally, though carrying twins means more frequent doctor visits. Laura continues working as long as she can. I throw myself into building my client base, knowing that we'll need more financial stability once the babies arrive. Ethan helps us move and is almost as excited about setting up the nursery as we are. He insists on painting the room himself, choosing a soft yellow. We decide to wait to find out the sex of the babies. Laura's parents visit for a weekend in December, and I'm nervous about meeting them officially as their daughter's boyfriend and the father of their future grandchildren. But they're warm and welcoming. On New Year's Eve, Laura and I stay home. We order pizza and watch movies, falling asleep on the couch before midnight. I wake up around 2 to find Laura sitting up, her hand on her stomach. What's wrong, I ask. I think I felt them move, she says quietly. It was like little flutters right here. She guides my hand to her stomach, and we sit very still, waiting. After a few minutes, I feel it too, the faintest movement. That's them, Laura whispers. That's our babies. In March, when Laura is 32 weeks pregnant, we have a scare. She starts having contractions during the night, and we go to the hospital. After several hours of monitoring, they determine the contractions are Braxton Hicks, not dangerous, but a warning to take things easier. The nursery is finished by the end of March with 2 cribs and more baby clothes than 2 infants could possibly wear. On April 20th, at 36 weeks, Laura wakes me up at 5 in the morning. Gregory, she says, and something in her voice makes me instantly alert. I think this is it. The contractions are different this time, stronger and more regular. We time them for an hour, and when they're consistently 5 minutes apart, we call the doctor and head to the hospital. The next 12 hours are a blur of monitors and medical professionals, and Laura working harder than I've ever seen anyone work. The first baby, a girl, is born at 4:37 in the afternoon. She's small but healthy with a loud crun. The second baby, a boy, follows 23 minutes later. Laura and I are both crying as the nurses place our babies on her chest, 2 tiny perfect humans that we created together. We named the girl Elena after Laura's grandmother and the boy Samuel after my grandfather. The next few days in the hospital are exhausting and wonderful. We learn to change diapers and swaddle babies and recognize different types of cries. Laura struggles with breastfeeding twins, but gradually we establish a routine. When we bring the babies home, our apartment feels both too small and impossibly large. The first few weeks are a haze of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but gradually we find our rhythm. Elena is the calmer baby, content to sleep for longer stretches. Samuel is more demanding, wanting to eat more frequently, but he also smiles earlier. Laura is an amazing mother, patient and intuitive. Watching her with our children, I fall in love with her all over again. I discover that I love being a father more than I ever expected. By the time the babies are 3 months old, we've settled into a routine that feels sustainable. Laura has started taking on small translation projects again. I've adjusted my design schedule to accommodate infant care. On a warm evening in August, when Elena and Samuel are 4 months old, Laura and I find ourselves on the balcony again. Do you remember that morning when I blocked the bathroom door? Laura asks. How could I forget? I reply. You scared me to death. I was terrified too, she admits. I had no idea how you would react. I look down at the baby monitor in my hand, listening to the soft sounds of our children sleeping. And now, I ask. Now I can't imagine any other life, Laura says. This crazy, chaotic, beautiful life we've built together. The twins are 6 months old now, sitting up and babbling and developing distinct personalities. Elena is thoughtful and observant. Samuel is more social, smiling at everyone. We've started talking about marriage, Laura and I. Not because we feel pressured, but because we want to celebrate the commitment we've already made. We're thinking about a small ceremony next spring with Elena and Samuel as our tiny witnesses. Laura's translation business has grown. My design work is busier than ever. We're financially stable in a way that allows us to focus on our family without constant worry. Ethan has been dating someone new, a teacher named Janet who's wonderful with the twins. It makes me happy to see him building his own romantic life. Sometimes when I'm up feeding one of the babies while Laura sleeps, I think about the man I was a year ago, single, focused on work, content with my uncomplicated life. That man would be amazed by the person I've become. Being a parent has changed me in ways I didn't expect. I'm more patient, more organized, more aware of the preciousness of time. I'm also more tired than I ever thought possible, but it's a good kind of tired. Laura has changed too, growing into motherhood with grace and strength. She's more confident now, more sure of herself. Watching her with our babies, I'm reminded daily of how lucky I am. The challenges are real, of course. Caring for twins is exhausting, but even our disagreements feel different now, rooted in shared commitment rather than individual frustration. Last week, Laura and I managed to get a babysitter and go out for our first real date since the babies were born. Instead of talking about ourselves, we spent most of the evening showing each other pictures of Elena and Samuel and discussing whether Samuel's new tooth was coming through. We laughed about how much we had changed, how completely our children had taken over our thoughts. But we also marveled at how right it felt. When we got home, we checked on Elena and Samuel, both sleeping peacefully in their cribs. Standing there together, watching our children sleep, I felt a completeness I had never experienced before. Now, as I finish telling this story, Elena and Samuel are almost 7 months old. They're crawling and getting into everything. But they're also laughing and playing and showing us new aspects of their personalities every day. Laura and I are planning our wedding for next May when the twins will be a year old. We've decided to write our own vows, wanting to acknowledge the unconventional path that brought us together. I think about that morning often when Laura blocked the bathroom door and changed everything. At the time, it felt like a crisis, but it turned out to be the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of my life. Sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them. Sometimes love finds us in the most ordinary moments. And sometimes the most profound changes begin with someone saying, "We need to talk." I'm grateful for every unexpected turn that brought Laura and me together. Most of all, I'm grateful for Elena and Samuel, two perfect little people who exist because their parents were brave enough to love each other despite the complications. As I write this, I can hear Laura in the nursery singing a Spanish lullaby to one of the babies. Her voice is soft and musical. In a few minutes, I'll join her, and we'll spend the evening playing with our children. It's an ordinary evening in an extraordinary life, the kind of life I never imagined but can't imagine living without. It's the life that began with a conversation in a hallway, with Laura's hand pressed against a bathroom door. "We needed to talk," she said, and we did, and everything changed for the better.